Well, I want to welcome you all to our Space for Grace today. We are talking about Sabbath rest. And I know that has been a significant challenge, particularly for me, and I know for a lot of you all as well. In this COVID times, there is no rhythm that is expected, right? It's like every day is a new kind of thing. I've asked Cathy Johnson to lead our devotion today, and Cathy, take it away.
I'm going to start with Jesus' words in Matthew, and this comes from the Message. Well, it was here a minute ago. There we go. Are you tired, worn out, burned out? Come to me. Get away with me and you'll recover your life. I'll show you how to take a real rest. Walk with me and work with me. Watch how I do it. Learn the unforced rhythms of grace. I won't lay anything heavy or ill-fitting on you. Keep company with me, and you'll learn to live freely and lightly. And I have a quote from Richard Rohr in one of his daily emails, and he's actually using words from Christine Walters Paintman, who uses the idea of receiving rather than taking. And I shared this at the Receiving Resurrection retreat, so a few of you have heard this already, but I've come to believe that this also applies to a lot of ministry, not just photography or resurrection. So these are Christine's words. Contemplative practice is a receptive practice. We make ourselves available for grace to break in. We open ourselves to listen and ponder. We often use the word take to describe our relationship with photography. Our culture emphasizes taking time, taking what's mine, and taking a break. What we are endeavoring to do in this process, however, is to receive rather than take the gifts around us, to be present enough so that when the photographic moment arrives, we are able to receive it fully with our whole hearts. So I wonder if we trade Sabbath for photography and photograph. Taking photos is a common phrase, and changing that perception and process may be hard to break, but I gently invite you to consider what reframing this might look like for you and what it evokes in you. I invite you to bring a new awareness to how words and phrases can shape our experience and practices. Rather than taking photos or shooting them or even making photos, we will practice receiving images as gift. The traditional words for photography are possessive and aggressive. Yet the actual mechanism of photography is that light is reflected off of a subject and received by the camera through the lens opening. We can create conditions for a good photo, but ultimately we must stand in a posture of receiving and see what actually shows up in the image. The poet Rainier Maria Wilkie writes in one of his poems that no forcing and no holding back. When we are receptive, we let go of our agendas and expectations. We allow ourselves to see beneath preconceived ideas. Rather than going after what we want in life or forcing, we cultivate a contentment with what actually is. Similarly, instead of holding back and merely observing life or falling asleep to it, we stay awake and alert, participating fully in its messiness, and we keep our eyes open for the holy presence in its midst. Photographing in this way can become an active revelation. One of the gifts of art in general, and photography in particular, is that the artist can offer others this vision of the graced, ordinary moment. And I think particularly about Sabbath is remembering that we're not in control. And if we shift from photography of taking something to what do we receive, isn't maybe that's part of what Sabbath is about as well. Is what's there waiting for us to receive rather than trying to make Sabbath happen. So I'll stop there for a moment, and Matt has some more words, I believe.
Well, I do have some more words later, and we can talk a little bit about Walter Brueggemann and Sabbath as resistance, but I'm interested in you taking that further, Cathy. Let's keep going with that. I love this idea of, and we talked about this at the retreat, right? We have all these aggressive terms. We snap a photo, we, you know, and we spend a whole weekend, we blow up a photo, right? They're all very violent and aggressive images. And we spent a whole weekend receiving images. I'd love to receive Sabbath. You have a presentation that you wanted to share. Do you want to do that now, or do you want to end with that?
Just maybe a couple more words. I'm guessing that most of you have done Lectio Divina of some kind. So this is kind of a visio divina of autumn images. And so I invite you to receive them and see which one really kind of stirs something in you, like, oh, if I could just go sit in that chair, or take time to see that color, or whatever it is. I don't want to prescribe too much for you because then you won't receive it. But notice what it stirs in you in relationship to Sabbath, and that it doesn't have to be a whole day's worth, but just to receive that opportunity, however it might come to you. So let's begin by just kind of quieting ourselves and taking those 3 long, slow, deep breaths to see if we can't quiet. Not all the chatter, I'll be realistic, but maybe at least that first layer of chatter and monkey mind that might be going on. So 3 slow, deep breaths. And the images.
What happened, Cathy?
I don't know. It wasn't advancing.
Oh, okay.
Staying on the first slide, so whoops.
If you need to manually forward them.
When I practiced it this afternoon.
So you can't manually forward
Well,
them?
I can when I'm just watching it, but I don't know how to. Let me check something here.
We had tested this before we started. We
And I
thought
tried
it
the
worked.
whole thing this afternoon to time it, so it worked just fine then, of course.
not lose heart. Do not lose heart. Life is at work. Do not lose heart. Do not lose heart. Do not lose heart. Life is at work. Do not lose heart. Have courage, friends. Have courage, friends. Lean into love. Have courage, friends. Have courage, friends. Have courage, friends. Lean into love. Have courage, friends. Do not lose heart. Do not lose heart. Life is at work. Do not lose heart. Do not lose heart. Do not lose heart. Life is at work. Do not lose heart. Have courage, friends. Have courage, friends. Lean into love. Have courage, friends. Have courage, friends. Have courage, friends. Lean into love. Have courage, friends. Do not lose heart. Do not lose heart. Life is at work. Do not lose heart. Do not lose heart. Do not lose heart. Life is at work. Do not lose heart.
Thank you for that, Cathy. Well, would anyone like to share maybe an image or something that bubbled up in them as you were receiving images?
It's my favorite time of year coming up, and the yellow leaves under the tree, that's where I wanted to sit and maybe even pile those leaves up and sit in them.
I love that single maple leaf. Oh my gosh. It was absolutely gorgeous.
Say that again, Lance. You were kind of echoing there.
Yeah, I don't know why. I said I loved that single maple leaf, that you could see the veins on the leaf and how it all patterned out. Oh my God, it was absolutely gorgeous.
I was
Oh, go ahead, Amy.
I was struck by the architecture of some of the buildings. Actually, the very first image, I was like, "Is that Columbia?" It looked so much like Columbia, except for the red swing. I noticed a swing, so I wanted to go back to Columbia actually, and just like walk around and yeah. So it was very lovely.
Yeah, the first image to me looked like, the quintessential college campus, and it was like, back to school time. So um, it was like, oh, where is that? But it was like representative of everywhere and new beginnings.
I was struck by the picture of the pergola and the sun rays coming through it, and I imagine myself sitting under that pergola. And I'm someone who I feel like I've been on the move all the time the last week or two, or maybe the last year. and I just imagine sitting under that pergola and allowing the sun to move and the shadows to come, and kind of like what Tom is doing right now. And to just let time come and let time pass and experience the change of the season, or experience the change of the day, rather than try to make something change or do something about it. Anyone else want to share?
I think one of the things that I really loved was it going back and forth between something very close up, something very far back. And so it just felt like you were getting different perspectives on the color. And I liked the movement back and forth.
I'm wondering if we could pivot and talk a little bit more about these challenging times we've been in. I know, there's someone on the call here who's just recovering from COVID, but these COVID times have been isolating. They've been challenging for leaders. This has been a time of a lot of stress and a lot of change, and being thrust into an online world sometimes, we're zoomed out and these kinds of things. I'm just wondering if you all could share a little bit about maybe your current Sabbath practices, or perhaps particular, COVID quarantine challenges that have challenged your normal Sabbath routine.
I think that one of the things that I've tried to incorporate is a daily routine, carving out quiet space and allowing that to somehow set my day with a strong sense of just being in God's presence. I haven't been able to find that in actual whole day chunks, but as long as I stay within a good portion of my mornings, in particular, sometimes out here under the pergola, first thing in the morning, just as it gets light, that has really seemed to make a difference. Because you don't know from day to day what's coming along, and the weariness that you could feel, or where I was actually last year, it's made a profound difference, I think.
I think that is such a key to good Sabbath rest, Tom, to build in daily routines, and to also not think of the Sabbath strictly as a 24-hour period, but that there can be Sabbath rest in different compartment. Maybe you take a couple mornings off, you take one evening off, you take a couple afternoons off. Ministry's hard, and it's hard to block out a whole 24 hours. So I hear that. It's very wise words. Thank you. Others of you, maybe current Sabbath practices or challenges?
Well, as far as current challenges go, I had to, this last week, I had to write my newsletter article for the church newsletter. And I always go back to the previous month. And I look where we've been, look what we've done, and then I look at my calendar and look ahead to see what's coming up on the calendar for the next month. And when I went to write the article for the September newsletter, the very first thing that popped into my head and subsequently came out through my fingertips onto the keyboard was, well, August certainly didn't go the way we all planned, did it?
Right.
I don't know. August just completely and totally fell apart. And somehow or other, the church managed, they rallied around and they picked up the pieces and said, okay, this is what we've been given, and this is what we're going to do next, and we will survive this. It's not going to, we will be fine. So I'm just blown away by the way they all came together and said, this will be okay. This too shall pass.
One of the things that I've never been able to do with any regularity is taking some quiet 10 minutes for meditation every day. And the pandemic finally drove me to it. And that's how I wind up my days. And it's just made a huge difference because I feel like so many things it's been so challenging in so many ways, but that has allowed me to be at peace in the evening, and it helps.
That is wonderful to hear, Karen. I'm enough of an extrovert that a lot of honoring the Sabbath for me is being in community, encountering God through the voice of others. So, having a Friday evening meal or something with others. And so to hear that COVID times had something new blossom forth for you is great, because I only feel like, all the things that I've lost, it's been hard to see the things that I've gained. Anyone else? Some insights, some thoughts, some Sabbath practices, or lack thereof?
Well, at least the one thing I try to be consistent about is Friday to Saturday noon, I am off of the computer and I hardly mess with the phone unless I check once in a while to see if somebody called. But I really do shut down, or try to. I realized Saturday afternoon, I haven't been on the computer since Thursday afternoon. So that helps.
If I can spin us off in a bizarre direction for a brief moment, the reason why I made such a face after my phone call is I just got a funeral for a 16-year-old.
Oh no.
And that was mom on the phone. So
Oh my.
Oh gosh.
Most of us have done a variety of funerals, but if you've never done a teenager, they're a little bit different. So
was this
Sorry to hear that.
expected?
No, this was a
Oh
car
my
accident. This is an unexpected car accident.
Oh my
And
goodness.
It sounds like her boyfriend was driving.
Oh boy.
So.
Oh dear.
And a largely unchurched family. So going to help them try and work through that process as much as possible. So as you're talking about Sabbath keeping and taking time off,
You are jumping in with both feet to
then
a
other things
wild
crop
few
up.
days. Yeah.
Hmm.
Yeah. Matthew, will you be involved? You may be involved with the school too.
Yep. I actually talked to the principal already. We're gonna do some things for the kids. Children at that age just really never expect to lose a classmate. So we're gonna be ready for some fallout from that. Well, I appreciate you listening to that for a few moments. So thank you. And it's the Roush family if you want to hold them in your prayers.
Yes, thank you for that.
Matthew, and you too.
Thanks.
Anyone else like to share some of the challenges that they've had or some of the practices that they've had over time that have worked for them? If not, I'll read a couple quotes. I mentioned Walter Brueggemann. A lot of you know Brother Walter, and he wrote a book called Sabbath as Resistance. I thought at first, as I wanted to talk a little bit more about this topic, I thought, well, this isn't going to have anything for me. I mean, COVID has thrown a monkey wrench in all this. This was written before COVID. But I think a lot of it just has to do with this first quote that I'm going to read. Sabbath becomes a decisive, concrete, visible way of opting for and aligning with the God of rest. That for me is a big piece of it, right? The deliberateness of it. I mean, Matthew's got this funeral coming down the pike. If it hits on his Sabbath, I mean, he's got to move his Sabbath, right? But a lot of it really is being deliberate about Sabbath and opting for it and aligning with God. Tom talked about that, and not in 24-hour blocks, but to still align himself with the God of rest. Here's another quote from Walt. Thus, I have come to think that the fourth commandment on Sabbath is the most difficult and most urgent of the commandments in our society, because it summons us to intent and conduct that defies the most elemental requirements of a commodity-propelled society that specializes in control and entertainment, bread and circuses, along with anxiety and violence. That's a very powerful quote. A commodity-propelled society that specializes in control and entertainment, bread and circus. I thought of my cell phone when I read those words. This little device that's supposed to make my life easier, and it's just always calling for my attention and demanding my attention. It draws me away from relationships. It draws me away from people. It draws me away from God. It can become one of the most distracting and awful things when I'm trying to celebrate a Sabbath. So, how do those quotes ring true for you all? You're a quiet bunch today.
I was caught by the deliberateness of Sabbath. We have to choose to align ourselves. And I think that is a form of resistance, because in our world today, it's always go, go, go. And so you have to deliberately choose to say, no, I'm going to stop. And I'm doing it because I want to be in relationship with God, and I want to do what God wants of me right now, which is stop. So I think it takes a lot of deliberateness. And in seminary, I've actually gotten pushback even from our professors whenever I've written about the deliberateness of it, because they said nobody is that deliberate about anything. And I'm like, yes, you have to choose to be deliberate. So I think it's hard, obviously, but I think it's right that you have to choose.
as one of the boundary training leaders, I keep coming to boundary language. If we have to set the boundaries of our Sabbath, whatever it looks like, because the culture or our congregation is not going to do it for us. There's always needs or Matt, like you're saying, entertainment or something that some company wants us to buy. Like there's always encroachments. So we have to figure out what boundaries work for us and hold to them.
Yeah, I think that's a big piece of it. I mean, one of the things that Cathy mentioned early on, she mentioned the phrase unforced rhythms of grace. And I thought, yeah, but my cell phone, yeah, but my congregants. I love the concept of unforced rhythms of grace, but sometimes it means having good boundaries and understanding how to set that space for yourself. I think there's ways to do it. It's not just activating the deacons on our day off. I think it's communicating our expectations, communicating what we're up to. And, I'm going to turn my phone off. I love what Ann said. Yeah, I'm going to turn my phone off at noon and not come back to it much. I mean, if everybody in our congregation knows that, well, that changes things. If there's a true emergency, then someone's going to have to march down, bang on her door, because her cell phone's going to be put away and she might not look at it for 6 hours or 12 or something. I think if we communicate that up front, we can do ourselves a lot of good. One of the things Brueggemann talks about is he makes this fascinating connection. These are great chapters, very small, short little book. You can see it's very doable. The chapters are Sabbath and the first commandment, Sabbath, then resistance to anxiety, resistance to coercion, resistance to exclusivism, resistance to multitasking. And then the last chapter, he makes this fascinating connection with the 10th commandment. He talks about Sabbath and the 10th commandment. And you know the 10th commandment, right? Thou shalt not covet thy neighbors, all the stuff that's, and everything else that is my neighbors, And he talks about acquisitiveness, right? Acquisition, and he ties this with greed and covetousness. And he says that we live in a culture that is tied to that, right? We're not tied to the fourth commandment. We're tied to covetousness. We're tied to greed. And Sabbath is an antidote to anxiety from our cravings, he says. And then he talks about that in terms of neighborliness, that whole, and everything that is your neighbor's. He says, that includes the Sabbath. That includes your neighbor's Sabbath. And so for you to spend your Sabbath shopping is one way to, destroy and violate the 10th commandment while you're violating the fourth commandment. And that's what, a lot of us use our Sabbath for makeup. Like now we're doing all the chores we didn't do. Now we're doing all the shopping we didn't do. And he's saying, yeah, it's that, but it also has to do with being a good neighbor, that we're allowing by not working, by resting, we're allowing our neighbor to not work as well, right? And so it's a gift to, and when I lived in Israel, I experienced that. I almost thought that, their ideas were being impressed upon me, like I was being forced to celebrate their Sabbath along with them. But then as I started to experience it, I realized the refreshing nature of what happens when a whole community is involved in Sabbath rest. There's a great neighborliness to it as well. That I'm not going to force others into that work. So I don't know if Walter speaks to you there, but I thought I'd share some of those things. Any thoughts, reactions?
Once in a while, I try to remember that the Hebrew understanding of Sabbath and rest is that it begins in the evening. And so it's night and then day, that it's preparation for what's coming. It's not recovery from what we've done and exhausted ourselves. And I find I like that idea. I find it hard to live into it.
Mhm.
Kathy, I think that's one of the things I was trying to say in my response to Matt is that, you know, you see, I always seek to get a day. Normally it starts sometime on Thursday and most of Friday where it's just mine and everything. But as Matthew was sharing about, you know, the funeral, a week ago Friday, I was sharing dinner with some people and got a call that probably the closest person in the congregation to me personally had died, and this man was like a father to me. Just one of the most amazing people I've ever met. And so that automatically set things in motion for Saturday. I wake up Sunday morning and got a call from another family of one of the dearest ladies in our church who passed away. So all of a sudden, you know, while I had my Sabbath rest on that day, I'm faced with meeting both families on Monday. I had a funeral on Friday, a funeral on Saturday, and church service on Sunday. And so there was no day for that. There was just, you know, I don't care what kind of boundaries I would have put up. There was not enough hours in the day to get that. And I think that if I didn't have this sense of priority of God in quiet space in the morning, I don't know that I would have made it through that. It was difficult enough as it was, because I'm a firm believer that Sabbath days are important, but I also realize that in what we do, that often gets shifted. So I think there has to be a place for little mini Sabbaths throughout the week where the connection and the shutting out of all of the cacophony that comes at us from the world, all of the demands, all of the things that are screaming at us all the time. There has to be a place apart from that. Otherwise, the soul just gets so weary and gets so discouraged and almost anemic with that. And so that has been a practice, kind of like what Karen was sharing, that during this COVID season has really become important to me, something I've never been able to really regularly feature in my life. It's been a lifesaver in many ways for me.
I'm hoping we can end our time kind of a challenge to you all, and that's either to adopt a new practice personally or maybe even collectively that might help us live into rest and Sabbath rest better. Maybe it's doubling down on something that's worked well for you, like Karen has discovered. But what's a practice that you might want to, a new practice that you might want to adopt personally? Maybe promises that we can make to one another to help you engage in Sabbath.
So interestingly enough, I would say that the chance to gather with colleagues and talk things through has always been something really important to me and something that I really tried to make happen for many years. And during COVID, it was so hard that I'm finding it takes so much more intentionality to do that now than it used to. It's just, so I think that one of the things maybe that I've done recently is relied on others to do that and maybe include me instead of taking the initiative myself. And one of the things I'd really like to do, or one of the commitments I'd like to make, is maybe to try and get back into the practice of taking initiative as well.
Dean's been very quiet on this call, but I'll share one of the wonderful things. He's been such a great colleague at the presbytery office with me. And I love the fact that he knows when my Sabbath is, and he'll vocalize that. And sometimes, he'll say, well, I would have called you on Friday with this, but I knew it was your Sabbath, and so I knew it could wait until today. Other times he'll call me on the Sabbath, and he'll start off by saying, I know today is your Sabbath, but I wanted, and that frames it right there for me. Like he's reminding me that that this is what I'm called to do. And he just needs a quick answer, and then I can go back to my Sabbath. So it's been great. And when he does call me on my Sabbath, it's for good reason. It's like, oh yeah, we do need to tie that off, don't we?
Yes, but also many times prior to that happening, I called you many times on Friday, not knowing it was your Sabbath, till you let me know that it was.
But ever since I did, then you.
Oh, yeah, once you said you did, I changed my behavior, but it required, I'll say that to everybody, unless you set the space aside and let people know. I mean, I was just blithely going along, calling Matt anytime on Friday, because it's a work day of the week, isn't it? So till I was told and let known, or, it wasn't, it wasn't a threatening thing. It was more like, somehow.
No, it was all on me. I had not communicated to you that was my Sabbath. Yeah.
The problem with being retired, the whole every day. My wife's over here going, boring.
I finally watched Downton Abbey for the first time, and then that first episode or two, this the top kind of woman, she says, "What is a weekend?" And I just thought, oh my gosh, this, when you have that much money, right? What is a weekend? She's never had a work week before. I thought that was hysterical,
But there's a quote that came out of my seminary days back in the 60s. I think it was a book. I don't know if it was a paper or a book, boy, it's called Layback, but the title of it was, Are You Running With Me, Jesus? I don't know if anybody else had read that or not. That was back from, most of you are too young to even think about that book. But, the idea is we're on the run all the time, but, maybe there's a chance Jesus is running with us. And for those of us in this world that are ADD, that's a helpful thought.
I think as ministers, it's important to adopt some Sabbath practice that you can take with you as you go, because like Tom's mentioned, there's so many interruptions in ministry. There's just no way to do this without doing a funeral or responding to this or that or the other. Anyone else maybe thinking about adopting a new practice?
I think one of the things I need to be a little bit better on, and this, I don't know, this falls into the category of new practice, but it's something you spoke of very clearly, is voicing to my congregation, this is my time, and not making exceptions too much. But I think, it's so easy to cram one more thing on the edge.
Going into September, I am now changing my day off. And so this is a great time to communicate that, because I need to, because it's changed, but also just a reminder that I don't work 7 days a week. At least I try not to. So it's going to be working on communicating that in multiple ways. For holding myself accountable and just letting the congregation know it's Fridays now instead of Mondays.
Fridays work well for me. Cathy, thanks so much for sharing the Visio Divina, and any concluding thoughts you might have for us, Cathy?
Yes, I just wonder, we have to be intentional And yet, how can we receive Sabbath rather than try to make it happen? It's like there's a tension there.
Yeah, receiving the time as a gift that's not our culture, is it? We're so used to tackling things and taking things, and it's a very different focus. And I really appreciate you reminding us of that practice.
Yeah, even carving time out is, you got to have a knife. Oh, Matthew, God be with you as this week continues.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
Those funerals are so hard. Would someone like to close us with prayer and lift up the family that Matthew mentioned?
I will.
Thanks, Sam.
Oh, gracious God, I thank you for your divine presence in the hearts and minds and lives of my sisters and brothers gathered here, for the gifts and graces you have given to Cathy to share on receiving your care and your way of rest. We lift up to you those we know who need sure and certain signs that you are with them right now, especially the Rosh family as they have lost a precious child, and for the families of whoever else was in the vehicle. Help them to know that your arms receive with divine love. Be with Matthew as he ministers to this family, to his congregation, and to the students and the community. We remember Tom as he grieves the passing of dearly beloved in his congregation. We remember those among us who are recovering from illness and injury. Encourage us in these days and weeks ahead. Be present with us in times when we crave rest, in times when we need a kick in the pants to move forward. Guard, guide, keep us this day, so that we who are wearied by the changes and chances of this life may find our rest and our peace in you. Through Christ I pray. Amen.
Amen. Well, thank you for joining us today. And as you go from this place, I hope that you will welcome all of God's time as a gift. May blessings be upon you all.
Thank you. Peace
That's
be
so
with you.
Peace.